and welcome back to another Design Clips here at W+9. This is Dawn Woolslegel, and today I'm giving you a closer look at the Freehand Florals Stamp and Companion Die. Now this is a newer set. This will be available April 5th, 2016, and this one is a layering stamp set, and it is based on my Copic floral illustrations. So I thought I would start out by giving you guys a behind the scenes look at how I illustrate these floral arrangements with Copics. So this is the inspiration behind this stamp set. I illustrated a set of cards that went up for auction recently, and a lot of you asked if I would make a stamp set out of the images. Now, I wanted to keep those particular images unique to that card set because it was put up for auction. However, I went ahead and illustrated some new ones. I did some of it digitally, I did some of it on paper, and I was able to come up with something that I think really emulates the look, but still keeps that card set unique, and it's not an exact replica. I absolutely love the way this stamp set turned out. I was so excited to test it. When it came in, I had such high expectations. I was so scared that it wouldn't work that I actually put off testing it until like the very last second. But I'm happy to report it works wonderfully. So here's a look at the stamp set. It is multi-step, so you stamp each layer in a slightly darker shade than the previous layer. And when you add them all up together, you get this gorgeous hand illustrated look. So let me go ahead and show you guys how you actually use the set. This is the card that I'll be creating today, and we'll be using the stamp set and the companion dies. Now you don't have to use the companion dies with this set. You can use it alone and it turns out beautifully. In fact, if you are stamping it without using the dies, you really don't have to be overly careful about how you line these up. Just line up the center area and stamp each layer and you're good to go. But if you're going to be using the companion dies, you do want to be more careful about how you line them up. And there is a trick to this. If you try to stamp all of your layers and then die cut, it's going to be almost impossible to line up the die cut. So the trick is to stamp out your base layer first, then do your die cutting, and then use the edges of your die to line up the subsequent layers. So here I'm just stamping out all of my bases first. And for that I'm using Hayride, and then I'm using a mix of our Hayride and our Miami Spice. So I'll ink it up first with our Miami Spice, and then I will kind of tap it through the Hayride to get that nice peachy color. And then I'm also using our Little Piggy. And now I'm just going to come in and die cut all my flowers. I'm lining up the lower bottom half of that rose with the edge of the die. So just those bottom petals, that's what I'm using to line up my die. I'm ignoring the top petals because they're not going to line up just yet. They're not going to line up until we add our subsequent layers. So I'm really only paying attention to the bottom petals there on the large rose. Now for the smaller rose, I'm going to line up the top petals. So I'm not going to bother with the bottom petals. I'm going to really concentrate on lining up that die with the top petals. Because again, when I come and stamp my subsequent layers, they're going to fill in the bottom petals. So I'll just line up my top petals here. And then do all of my die cutting. Then I'm going to repeat the same steps for the leaves. This time I'm stamping them in our last leaf and our Mojito die inks. I always like to stamp at least 2 different colors for my foliage just to give some variation. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out all of my elements that I'm going to be die cutting. It's easier just to get it all done in one pass, and then all we have to do is worry about assembling our card. Now for the bud, we're going to be die cutting this, so I want to get the base down. So I'm going to start by stamping out the stem and the calyx first, and then I'm also going to stamp out this little stem of greenery here. Now this one can be used with any of the filler flowers in the set, so it's very versatile, and however you use it, it's really up to you. I've also stamped another filler flower in our cockle shell. That's not true. It's in our Bloomsbury. And now I'm stamping out the rest of the base for our little rosebuds, and I'm stamping a little bud in each of the colors that I used for the main larger flowers. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and die cut all of these pieces. So once they're all done, I can come in and start adding the next layers of color. And you'll want to choose either a second generation of the same color or a shade or two darker. It depends on how much contrast you're looking for. So I'm going to pick up the second layer here, and when I line this up, you're going to line up the center and then the bottom edges of the petals. So you can see there are those two bottom edges with the bottom of the image that I've already stamped. And I usually like to get the center lined up first and then just make any small adjustments before I push down to make sure that those two bottom edges are lined up. Now for the third layer, you can see here on the die cut there's a little bit of white space still left. Those are the two marks that you're going to line up with these two areas here on the stamp. So you're just going to line those up and stamp down. And there you have it. Because the full image isn't formed until you have all three layers stamped, this is why I recommend stamping your base layer first and then doing your die cutting. Because otherwise, if you don't line these up exactly right, it's going to be impossible to line up the die cut afterwards. Now the other rose is similar. You're going to stamp your second layer, and for that you're going to line up the center and stamp down. I like to line up the center and then also line up the outer right edge there, and then you'll come in and do your third layer, and for that one I'll line up the center and then line up that bottom petal on the leftover white space that's on the die cut. Now for the bud, there are also three layers. So you're going to take and line up that second layer. I line it up with the edge of the die cut on the right side there. And then you're going to come in with your third layer. And again, I like to line that one up with the right edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that for the rest of my roses here. And the leaves are pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to line up the stem of the leaves there with the empty space left on the die cut, and I'm using our Appletini dye ink here to add the detail for the leaves. And I'll use that same Appletini ink to add in the detail layer for the other set of leaves as well. And I'll do the same thing for the filler flowers as I did for the roses. For this one I like to line up the center and the bottom edge. Next I want to start arranging my bouquet. So we have all of our die cuts on top, and then we have a layer of foliage and flowers stamped underneath. So I'm going to start by putting together that arrangement on top first, and then I'll move it out of the way and stamp my other images underneath. I've told you guys before, when I do bouquets or floral arrangements, I like to work in triangles and I like to work in odd numbers. I usually start with my 3 base flowers, and then I tuck my leaves in between, making sure that the leaves come in between the flowers as well. And I tuck them in anywhere I have any bare spots or blank spots, or another flower might be too much or too big. So that's usually where I tuck my foliage. So once I've got this arranged just like I want it, I'm going to use a little trick that I picked up from Lori Willison, and this is genius. You're going to use this press and seal to pick up the whole arrangement at once. I'm telling you, I don't know what, I'm so happy that she discovered this and shared it, because this is another one of those game changers, people. So I just pick up the whole arrangement there, and look, it's in place. I don't have to take a picture. I don't have to try to recreate it. It's going to be ready for me when I'm ready for it. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to be doing some extra stamping in the background of foliage and flowers. So that's what I'm going to do now. I know that my arrangement is going to go in the center of my panel here, and I didn't bother marking anything off because I really don't need to. If it was a floral arrangement, some of the leaves wouldn't be seen anyway. There would be a mass of leaves and flowers underneath. So it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly placed. I'm just keeping them in a round arrangement and keeping them near the center. I'm letting some go off toward the edges more. But when I lay that other bouquet on top of it, it's not going to matter if they're not perfect. So I'm just going to continue putting in some filler flowers and building up this bouquet. Again, I'm working from a central point and radiating out. And in some of the images, I'll even double stamp them to make them appear fuller or bigger. And then I'll come in with their second layers. These smaller ones only have 2 layers. And they're just for added contrast. You don't even have to stamp the second layers if you don't want to. This is our wild mango layered over our hayride, which is one of my favorite combos. You'll also notice that I'm just inking up portions of this and adding a little bit of the single little dots around the edges. And again, that just makes it look a little more organic and a little more full. I've added some more of the smaller flowers and the single leaves, and now I want to test this out with the rest of the bouquet on top of it. I don't want to go overboard just yet. I want to see if I've got enough in the background and how it's going to look. And because it's stuck to this press and seal, it's not going anywhere. I can kind of twist it and move it around and see exactly where I want to put it. I can also determine here if I need to add anything. Like I feel like I need a little more blue in the upper right there and then on the left. So I'm going to take it back off, and then I'm just going to fill in those little areas with a little bit more of that lake house. To adhere the die cuts, I'm going to adhere them all at once. I'm going to use some Tombow Mono Multi Glue, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the back of each of the die cuts. And then I can just flip this over and press it down. Now because this is a liquid glue, I'm going to give it a couple of seconds. I'm going to, push it down really good, make sure I rub all over so that it has some good adhesion on the back. I'll wait a couple of seconds and then I'll start peeling back this peel and stick. And it should release nicely and leave the die cuts behind. If it pulls any up, I can just add them in separately, but for this particular one, it came out quite easily. And then I decided that I didn't like the delineation between the pink and the kind of peachy yellow, and I felt like I needed to bring that pink over to the right side, so I'm just going to add in one more little rosebud over here, and I like that much better. I die cut this entire panel using the Sunshine Layers die and then mounted it to my card base with a little bit of fun foam. I've die cut a banner from our Bountiful Blooms die set, and I'll mount that with a little bit of 3M foam. This will be perfect to hold our greeting, and for that I'm using the Hello die cut also from the Bountiful Blooms die set, and I'll be cutting that from white cardstock that I've colored with our Little Piggy die ink. You guys know I don't use a lot of colored cardstock, so this is the perfect technique for me when I need a colored cardstock perfectly matched. I'm adhering that with multi-medium matte, and then to finish off the card I will just add a few pretty pink posh sequins. I love this set. I love the way it turned out. This is just one of the many ways that you can use this set, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this closer look. Remember, this set will be available beginning April 5th, 2016, and I hope you will head over to the blog to take a look at everything else that we're releasing this month. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!